And welcome on into the Coin Flip Podcast. Jacob Zimmerman, Martin Kelly. Yep, today we are going over my top 25 players in the NBA. As of today, Martin, so I'm going to factor in a couple different things. I'm going to tell you about what I'm going to be factoring in, but I'm excited. I've done some prep for this list. This is a list that I actually wrote down in the notes on my phone last year, and I kind of used that. I kind of used a couple other people's videos and rankings to solidify what I now think is the correct top 25 players in the NBA. I'll go through my criteria in just a sec, but Martin, you're going to be sitting back here relaxing through a lot of this video, but you're going to give your thoughts here in between. We're going to try to break this top 25 down into groups of 5. But Martin, I'm excited to do this with you, man.
I'm excited to do this with you too, bud. I mean, it's still no, it's the off season with the NBA, and not a whole lot of news has been going on with the NBA. But heck, man, talking about NBA is fun, dude. So let's get into some top 25. Let's get into some what we would talk in the off season rankings, dude. We won't do this during the regular season. We'll do this during the off season. I think this is perfect.
Perfect time indeed. I did this last summer or so, and I never really made a video out of it. So I'm glad we get to do this year. Martin, these rankings, I kind of dubbed them the gun to my head rankings. It's kind of centered around the idea of who would I want for the NBA Finals, or who would I want for a Game 7, as well as what does your body of work show over the last couple of seasons, but especially the last season. So what you've done, for say in 2023 is going to carry a little bit more weight than it would in 2020. Now, kind of take this list with, let's say, a 1% projection from last year. Not really a true projected top 25 for the top 24 or for the 2024 season, but it's really how these players are in present day right now, August 22nd. A couple of guys are doing the Team USA ball. Other guys are off on vacation. Other guys are getting jump shots in the gym as we speak. So kind of just consider that just a slight output on next season. But I think production as of recently is what trumps all on this list. And while certain players kind of get all NBA recognition in the regular season and then fall short in the postseason, others arise and outperform them when the game plans become serious. In a world where the regular season matters as little now as it ever has, Martin, I don't think it's fair. Now, I know you might judge these players differently, but I don't think it's fair to heavily judge a lot of these players on missing a lot of regular season games. Now, a lot versus a little is a difference, but in the world where not a lot of people tune into the regular season anyway, I'm not going to dock a lot of these players on missing a ton of regular season games. With that being said, Martin, I've kind of, I mentioned I broke these down into groups of 5, but I have the honorable mentions in front of us. Screen share, you can see them. Kyrie, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, Drew Holiday, Domantas Sabonis, Brandon Ingram, Tyrese Halliburton, and Zion Williamson, not to mention many, many more who could be on this honorable mentions brief list. But just to kind of dive into these real quickly, I can almost give, one-sentence answers for why I didn't have them in the top 25. Martin, Kyrie, I think the trade from the Mavericks, kind of the team impact didn't look too great. He hasn't had a ton of postseason success recently, so I left him off the list. Paul George, I think his defense is kind of, although I misspelled his name clearly, I think his defense has kind of shifted down a little bit. And, while I'm not going to grade all these guys based off of games played late, I think Paul George has some room for improvement to get back to what he was in 2018. Maxey, a young player. Drew Holiday had a bad postseason series. Sabonis, I think he could step up. Some other guys are just, producing more right now. Brandon Ingram's trying to keep the Pelicans afloat. Halliburton is a nice young piece. Zion, he's just missed probably too many games to be even eligible for this list. Martin, your reaction to my honorable mentions?
So the first 3, we could have probably a 30-minute conversation on why maybe Kyrie, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey deserve to be top 25 players if you based it on either their past or with Maxi, his past playoff performances at some point during those runs. With Drew Holiday, I agree with you. I don't think he deserves to be mentioned. I don't deserve to be mentioned. I don't think he deserves to be on the list. Zion, I agree, doesn't deserve to be on the list. Sabonis, Brandon Ingram, Halliburton, they may have a case. Sabonis, he had an uprise in points this year. BI, he took on more responsibility in New Orleans. Halliburton, I mean, that's just another young kid that Sacramento found and is utilizing to their advantage. So you got to give him credit for that. So I can see it all. The Zion, if there's a name that stands out on the list, it is Zion because man, what he could be if he would just stop eating cheeseburgers and eating all the food in New Orleans. But nonetheless, I'm not Zion, so I think your honorable list is great. I think there's a few names that I think is a bit stretched, but I also think there's a good list of players that could be on the list. So I think you did a good job.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to the real list. Martin, here's the first group of players 25 through 21, I have Mikal Bridges, John Morant, Pascal Siakam, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Bam Adebayo. Now, I think Mikal Bridges is going to be a guy on my list who a lot of people think, what the heck? Why is he, on the list? Some people might even forget about this guy for an honorable mention. But Martin, when it comes down to two-way wings in the NBA. I don't know how much more valuable you can get than that. Mikal Bridges was arguably the third best player on the Suns 2021 Finals team. And post-trade, Martin, once he got to the Nets, this is the primary reason why I think he is now the 25th best player in the NBA. He had, in 27 games for the Nets, he averaged 26 points per game. He has career postseason splits. All of his postseason games he's ever played in his career, his efficiency is 47% from the field, 38% from three, and 88% from the line. And he's one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, and he's likely an all-star with the usage rate he is going to get into 2024. I'm not projecting a ton, but I think in this present day, Mikal Bridges is underrated. I got him at 25. To Ja Morant. I had Ja off the list to start with, but I was taking a look at his postseason numbers over the last couple seasons, and I just couldn't keep him off. He's statistically outperformed Kyrie in the last couple of postseasons, and I like to have a mix of not all just guards, not all just forwards, not all just big men in the list. He averages 27 points per game across 3 postseasons that he's played, and against the Lakers, he shot 42% from 3. In 2023. So I think he kind of has proven that his shooting is a little underrated, and if he can keep that up, if he can stay on the floor, bounce back after the suspension, I think he is definitely a top 25 player in the league. I think his winning impact has been shown, although the Grizzlies have been able to win quite a few games without him, and that might lower his value just a little bit, but nevertheless, I think Ja Morant is an exciting player, and he did drop some spots from last year's list, but he's still top 25. Nevertheless, that just goes to show how tight these rankings can be. Pascal Siakam, I think he's another underrated guy. Now, he's the unquestioned best player on a play-in team. And when you kind of think about that, there's not really a ton of guys who you would say are borderline star players who are, the unquestioned best player on a play-in team. The Raptors have kind of been a directionless franchise now for some years, and Siakam, ever since that 2019 second option championship, he's kind of been under the radar, but he's still been putting up good stats. 24, 8, and 6 on 48% shooting last year, and he's still a proven playoff performer overall, although he's not as skilled, or he doesn't have all these different facets he can go to in his game sometimes, but Siakam nevertheless still top 25. Jaren Jackson Jr., I actually have him above Ja as technically what's the best player in the Grizzlies now, and that's because he won Defensive Player of the Year, and he's a perennial DPOY candidate, and he's getting better, and he led the league in blocks back-to-back, Martin. That's crazy. He had 3 blocks a game. There's no reason he can't be a 10 rebound per game guy. He hasn't quite been that yet, and he's nearing 20 points per game, and he probably will get that this year with Ja out. The three-point shot has some potential, and it's kind of at a year where it could go up, it could stay the same, it could go down. But I think when you have a player who's giving you what he is offensively, and he's arguably the best defender in the league, or one of the best defenders in the league, then he's got to be top 25 as well. To Bam Adebayo, he's been the second best player on 2 trips to the finals now, a perennial DPOI candidate, a borderline 20 and 10 guy, a capable passer. He has offensive limits. He's not going to just, kill everybody in the post play after play. He's not going to take it, from the elbow to the basket every play. He relies on a lot of things to come to him, but I think he's proven his value on a solid team. And if you're the second option on a team that's made it to the finals 2 out of the last 4 seasons now, yeah, you're top 25. Martin, let me get your thoughts on 25 through 21.
So I like the fact that you put Bridges in here. I thought the trade that Brooklyn made for Mikal Bridges was a smart move because it signaled that they weren't in a total going to go 15 wins type rebuilding team. They were still trying to be at least a marginal competitive average basketball team, which I liked. And maybe they can do some drafting or some free agency signings and maybe get back to what they are. Ja Morant falling down to 24. Now, this one's the big one because most lists last year had him probably in the top 10 as as one of the best players in the game. And for a kid that looked like he was on the rise and, made a case for that he was the player that should have been picked number 1 instead of Zion in that draft class. So I think him falling to 24 based on his performance this past season, based on the performance in the playoffs against the Lakers, based a little bit on his off-court issues and the atmosphere around Memphis. I think that's a good spot. Siakam on this list, I like it. He had a good season. He had better numbers and stats that he would like. It's unfortunate that Fred VanVleet left, so that kind of leaves him as the sole man. And OG, I forget his last name. I apologize about that, but that's probably the last 2 guys from that championship team. So they're still trying to hang on to that. We'll see what they do. And then I gotta disagree with 22 and 21. I would put Jaren Jackson Jr. ahead of Bam Adebayo, and I simply do that because you mentioned it real quick about the 2 playoff runs and Bam being part of those. I mean, obviously, those were more Jimmy Butler's, reasons on carrying them to the finals. And, I mean, that's 2 years in a row where they made it to the finals as the lowest seed and not as a higher seed. If Bam Adebayo is a top 25 player, then his team should be, 5th, 6th, or 4th in the Eastern Conference. Instead, they hang around 8th or 9th. So I think he needs to take a little bit of a hit because, yes, he did make it to the playoffs. Yes, he did make it to the finals. But you're having a fight in the bubble playoffs. You're having a fight in the in-play tournament. You're having to dig through a bunch of garbage teams to prove that you're actually an efficient player. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. has proven a little more to be more of an efficient and stronger player in the post than Bam. So that's the only disagreement I have with. The rest of it, I do like.
So overall, looking pretty solid. I am certainly keeping playoff success in my mind on this list. But Martin, we move now forward to the 20 through 16 range where we actually have all guards. Martin, I got Trae Young at 20, Anthony Edwards at 19, Jalen Brunson at 18, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, your man, at 17, and De'Aaron Fox at 16. So a lot of people, kind of as of late, I feel like have been actually underrating Trae Young. Now, we remember what happened with Trae Young. He kind of came in to the league, first 2 seasons, was playing statistically great, got a lot of comparisons to Steph Curry. Now, what we know about comparisons is that comparisons often kind of drive the public narrative about a player. Now, I know Trae Young has his weaknesses defensively, but we're talking about a guy who is leading the Hawks, for crying out loud. I mean, the Atlanta Hawks would be in the running for the top 3 worst teams in the NBA right now if Trae Young wasn't on that team. I truly believe that. In 2022, not this last season, but the year before, he led the NBA in total points and assists. He's the first player to do that since 1973. That's Nate Archibald. He just took the Celtics to 6 games in the 2023 postseason. We all know the Celtics are perennial, championship favorites according to Vegas. He's not as efficient as you would like to be, but you kind of have to factor in that Trae Young is taking some bad shots late in the shot clock. He kind of has that Allen Iverson role where nobody else is going to, get the shot up. It's just got to be him. And so he can take some bad shots. He's not a perfect player by any means, but I think overall Trae Young's a little underrated. And even if he's, inefficient, he's first in assists since he came in the league. This guy gets it done offensively. Anthony Edwards. Now I'm gonna factor into my list how Team USA is kind of admitting that Anthony Edwards is the number one option, or maybe even the best player in this moment. And while his NBA career has been nice, there's been maybe not enough evidence, if you really look into it, for Anthony Edwards being in this spot yet. But when you look most recently what he did against the NBA champion Nuggets, Martin, he dropped 32, 5, 5, and 2 steals against them in the postseason. And he was supposedly hurt in those games going into the postseason. In 2022, he shot 40% from 3 in 6 playoff games. He has an endless motor. He puts pressure on interior defenders while also having wing defenders have to think in the front of their mind he could pull up off the dribble from 3 at any moment. That's really tough when you're a good perimeter defender, to know that this guy could jump out the gym and dunk it from the free throw line, and he can also shoot it going around a screen off the dribble from 3. That's really, really hard to guard. That's why I have Anthony Edwards at 19. Another Team USA guy, Jalen Brunson. I have him at 18, Martin, because I think he just finds a way. Second option on a team that made the Western Conference Finals, turns right around, sort of changes the narrative around the Knicks, gets them into the second round, is a convincing best player in the series win over Cleveland. I mean, he's getting it done with Julius Randle being the worst playoff performer in the NBA. Brunson averaged 24 and 6 on 49, 42, and 83 splits. He's a rapidly improving player. He did those numbers in the postseason, I believe. He's a shifty guard. I think he's learned a couple things from Luka Doncic, and I think he's a good leader. I think he's proved that, he can handle a big market. And Jalen Brunson, by the looks of it, if you have the right number one, Jalen Brunson could be the second best player in a championship team. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at 17. Now, when it comes to getting the ball in the basket, there's not a lot of guys in the NBA who are better than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He understands his shot selection as good as anyone in the league, too, which I'm a big fan of. Martin, the mid-range is not dead as long as SGA is doing what he's doing. 31 a game on 50% is legit. Now, what I will say is Shai is very reliant on free throws. When you're averaging 10 free throws a game, when he gets into the playoffs, he's not going to be averaging 31 a game because of the free throw number alone. We know the free throw number gets cut in half from all these superstars. So it's going to happen to SGA as well, but I think SGA is in a great spot in his career right now. He's able to be the number one option. He doesn't have to really be the number one distributor. That's Josh Giddey. And so he can just go out there and get his buckets, and he's great at doing that. And if he improves some other areas in this game, then he will move up the list for sure. De'Aaron Fox, I'm giving credit to where credit is due based off of taking the Golden State Warriors and Steph Curry's 50-point performance to a Game 7. They had the 7th best regular season record last year. He was the clutchest player of the year, quote unquote. Another mid-range god whose speed with the ball is as good as anybody, Martin. Mid-range, he's got the 3 now. He can blow by and get to the rim whenever he wants. He averaged 27, 8, 5, and 2 in the postseason. However, his efficiency dropped from 51 in the regular season to 42% in the postseason. He did have the hand going on, but Martin, he broke the Kings' curse. He's the first player in almost 20 years to be able to say that. I have him at 16. Martin, what do you think of the second group?
So I like this. So I think Anthony Edwards deserves to be ahead of Jalen Brunson just based off of talent. Um, I think. I mean, obviously, I'm going to be biased here for a minute. SGA to me would be top 10, and you would even probably be top 15 in my eyes. That's just me, based on the 31 points. You talk about the playoffs and the inexperience. They were in the playoffs this past season, even though if it was a short amount of time, they were still in the playoffs. 16 points, shot 43%, shot 40% from the 3 point line, shot almost 50% from the mid range with the 2 points. His efficiency field goal percentage was 51%. He shot 95% from the free throw line. And you're absolutely right. He didn't get 10 attempts. He got 3.3, so he got less than that. But 16, 4 and 5. I mean, 16, 4 and 5 to start your playoffs is not a bad start in my eyes. I think Trey's in a good spot right there. I think the lackluster of the Atlanta Hawks and their, only one deep playoff run. I mean, it looked like they may have should have won that series against, against Milwaukee, but Milwaukee was a better team. And since then, it's just kind of been in and out of those playoff runs, so he hasn't been totally successful with that. Brunson, I like. You know what? He's doing what he's doing.
Martin, moving on to our next group of 5. I have Jaylen Brown at 15, Damian Lillard at 14, Jamal Murray at 13, Kawhi Leonard at 12, and Devin Booker at number 11. Now, here's where the order starts to get a little tight. Now, I'll start with Jaylen Brown here because I think what he's done, at least over the last couple of seasons, you have to say, okay, he's been the second option on a team that's capable of winning the title. The media can really change. I mean, he's played in 44 playoff games over the last 2 seasons. And that might be as large as anybody's sample size over the last 2 seasons. 23 points a game on 48% from the field and 37% from 3. That's pretty darn solid for number 2 option. He's had moments where he outplayed Tatum. In the finals the year before last. I think that counts. There's a world where I could actually see Jaylen Brown winning Finals MVP in 2024. That world actually does exist. Suddenly that $300 million contract isn't so bad. When he's hitting shots, this guy, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just because, I've happened to be watching the television. But I feel like when I happen to turn on the TV, Jaylen Brown just happens to go crazy. And he puts a level of fear into me that Jason Tatum doesn't quite do. Now, I have Tatum above Brown. Don't worry. But I think Brown, he's getting trolled by the whole left-hand comments. But let's not forget who Jaylen Brown actually is. Damian Lillard at number 14. I feel like the gap in people's heads between how good these players actually are and in reality how it is different. I think Damian Lillard is not that far behind Steph Curry. But their careers have had totally different circumstances to play out as differently as they have. He just averaged 32, 7, and 5. On decent efficiency, it was solid. He could shoot whenever he wants. Dame last played in the postseason 2 years ago, in 2021, where he averaged 34 and 10 on 46, 45, 94 splits on 13 3-point attempts per game. Martin, when you are shooting 45% from 3 on 13 attempts a game, that's absurd. Lillard's underrated. It's mostly because I think he's at a lack of supporting cast throughout his career. I mean, the fact that people are like, oh, Dame's never made a finals, but CJ McCollum's the best teammate he's ever had, that doesn't sit right with me. Damian Lillard has also had the best playoff game in NBA history according to the game score stat. I think that proves that Damian Lillard can turn into a superstar when it matters most. A guy that I have to have above him based off of his run to a title is Jamal Murray at 13. I don't understand why people aren't rating Jamal Murray as high as I am. This guy went absolutely nuclear in the bubble, and what we've seen play out, the 2023 season looked almost like the bubble. The Final Four was the exact same. You could argue 2020 and 2023, the seasons, have been the most consistent with what we can expect in the NBA. And Jamal Murray has been one of the 10 best players in the postseason both of those seasons. Now, he's not a great regular season player to this point. He's had the ACL. He hasn't really put that effort into the postseason, into the regular season that he has into the postseason. The alarming thoughts in his head haven't gone off in terms of it's time to take over. But he's a great number 2 option next to Jokic. He averaged 32 points per game in the series where he cooked my Lakers. In the postseason, his career numbers are 25 and 6 on 47, 40, 91 splits. For a career that's dominant, he's an unquestioned number 2 option on a team. And when you play that well alongside a Finals MVP, you have to be in the top 15. Kawhi Leonard's the toughest player to rank for me at number 12. We tend to think of his Clippers tenure as an underperformance, and it kind of is compared to, what he's shown us throughout his career. But his regular season numbers, when he has played as a Clipper, 25 and 7 on 50, 40, 88 splits as a Clipper. That's really good. In 2023, the postseason, he could only play 2 games. And Martin, this is kind of where I draw the line. A guy misses some regular season games. Whatever. Nobody's even watching the regular season at this point. A guy starts missing postseason games when I think if Kawhi Leonard plays that series against the Suns, they no doubt win. Then I'm going to start to dock you some points in the rankings when we just flat out have not been able to see you play at this high level at any point in the last 2 seasons when it really has mattered the most. He's not quite what he was defensively, I think, as well. His playmaking's not as good as some of the other guys above him. I think he could even be a better rebounder. His hands are absolutely huge. I think he could step up there. And, with everyone missing, injuries as of late, I'm not going to, completely dock some guys. I'm not going to leave them off the list. Some guys, I am going to reward for having, playing some healthy ball as of late, which you'll see late in the list. But I think Kawhi's injury is the most alarming to me, and it has resulted in his games played going down severely, and I think his production taking a hit slightly as well. But overall, Kawhi Leonard is a really tough player to rank. If you told me Kawhi Leonard could just be Kawhi Leonard, he would probably be higher on the list, but too much drama around him. Number 11, Devin Booker. Devin Booker had an insane shooting postseason, a very consistent score, and his 3 ball could be a little bit more efficient. He could be maybe a little bit better at finishing at the rim. Nevertheless, a great mid-range player. It's kind of crazy now that I think about it. The mid-range is totally back in the NBA. However, he's missing things from his game like playmaking and defense that prevent him from getting higher. But he has an argument for maybe one of the best scorers in the NBA. He can start to make that claim. I think there's some days where he looks like he's actually the true number 1 option, the true best player on the Phoenix Suns. But I have to reward him for being at 11, for being above a guy like Kawhi, because he just averaged 34 and 7 on 58, 51, 87 splits in the postseason. Even if that's fluky, Devin Booker's one of the best at putting the ball in the basket in the NBA. He needs to keep this hot streak up, though, and kind of erase from my mind his 2021 finals and his Game 7 against Luka. Martin, your thoughts on Group 3?
So, If it was up to me, I would just take Jamal, Dame, and Brown and put them at 11, 12, and 13. I would put D-Book and Kawhi at 14 and 15. Listen, the I get the postseason matters more these days, and I get the regular season is completely been washed because every sport doesn't care about the regular season anymore. It's all about the playoffs. It's all about the playoffs. And it's what annoys me about the playoffs because we can just throw 82 games down the drain and just say that 12 teams get into the playoffs and have a good time. That's another debate for another day. My point is, Book and Kawhi need to be punished and lowered on this list, and Murray, Dame, and Brown need to be elevated because two of those three guys had good postseason runs. Yes, Damian Lillard wasn't in the postseason, but what a regular season he had, okay? Considering he had to drag that Portland Trailblazers team to something, and he did all of that with that team, I 100% give him more credit and believe he deserves to be closer to that 10. Jamal Murray getting to the NBA Finals, winning the NBA Finals, being on that he was with Nikola Jokic, but he still put on a stellar performance in those playoffs and in the finals. Okay, for all the notion that Murray's not the two that should be with Jokic and all that notion about Murray not being a totally athletic or an above elite point guard is nonsense. He proved it in the playoffs. Jaylen Brown, yeah, he gets overshadowed because Tatum is his teammate, and the 50 points that Tatum had to close out the Sixers, and some of those performances Tatum had in small amount. It was only a couple games against Miami in the third round. They were amazing, but Brown to me was the consistent one through the playoffs. It was the consistent one that had the consistent in the regular season as well, and I believe he should be rewarded for that. Kawhi, I'm sorry, you don't play enough games. You just don't get on the list. I would actually take him off the list entirely if you ask me. I think putting him at 15 would be generous. He's not played enough games. I'm sorry, it's just been like that in the Clipperland. And to finish with D-Book, the stuff about D-Book and Chris Paul and not getting along and the issues starting even when they went to the finals and just the playoffs. Yes, he had stellar performances, but yes, and Kevin Durant being hurt and in his up and down game and all that. But Book and Paul were never on the same page. Paul got hurt. Durant got hurt. Booker did everything he could, and I understand he should be rewarded for that as well. But if you're having issues with Chris Paul and you can't get the team past another round in a series they probably should have won, and I don't know. I think there's more issues to the off court that I think D Book should take some punishment for. But if we're just basing it on court, I think he's in the right spot. But to me, I'd move Murray, Dame, and Brown up.
All right, Martin, are you ready for 10 through 6? The list is about to get really juicy now.
Give it to me. I already know. I already know your style.
We've been on the same page the majority of this podcast. It's quite impressive, but now I think things are going to slightly take a turn. Martin, here is where...
Just give it to me. Let me see.
Here's where your success in the postseason starts to matter over this next tier. I have Joel Embiid at 10. I have Jason Tatum at 9. I have Jimmy Butler at number 8. I have LeBron James at 7. And I have Kevin Durant at 6. Martin, let's start with Joel Embiid here. Like I said, this is really a true line in the sand. I have from Tatum and Embiid separating them from KD, LeBron, and Jimmy Butler. Let's start with Joel Embiid here. As things have gotten really controversial, I have your 2023 MVP all the way down at 10. I had Embiid. I don't know why I did this, but last year I actually had Embiid at 6. So Embiid is dropped for me, deservedly so. And let me explain why. We've never been able to trust Joel Embiid. The injuries, the bad eating, he doesn't step up in the biggest moments, which I will prove later. He flops more than any other player in the league when he's one of the biggest players in the league. And then he goes into the postseason press conference, post-game press conference, and then explains why it wasn't his fault. There's a whole lot of personality reasons or just fan of the game reasons to dislike Joel Embiid, and it seems like anybody who plays for the 76ers as of late. However, Joel Embiid is a real solid player. He's a top 3 big in the NBA, no doubt. He had a tremendous regular season. 33, 10, 4, close to 2 blocks a game on 55, 33, 86 splits. Martin, I like a big man who can shoot his free throws and hit his jump shots, which Joel has shown he can in the regular season. But Martin, though that 33, 10, and 4 dropped to 24, 10, and 3 on just 43% as a big man, which is not good. 18% from 3, that's Russell Westbrook status, in the postseason. Martin, I'm now going to list off what I think, and I'm going to do the same for Tatum. But this is the main reason why Joel Embiid cannot go any higher on my list. It's not just this season, it's what he's done for his whole prime that we've seen so far when it matters most. Martin, I'm going to list off his playoff exits in the last couple of seasons, meaning the last game he had in the postseason, the final loss to send him home. Here's what his stats were. In the 2019 send-off, Eastern Conference semis at Toronto, he was 6 of 18. In 2020 in round 1 versus Boston, once again, playoff exit, he's 8 of 18. In 2022, the Eastern Conference semis versus the Heat, he goes 7 of 24. And in the 2023 Eastern Conference semis at Boston, he goes 5 of 18. All of these performances, his final performance in the playoff exit. Now up to Tatum. Let's pick up where we left off. Here are Tatum's numbers in his postseason exit games. These are also very alarming. In 2019, Eastern Conference semis at Bucks, he goes 3 of 10. 2020, Eastern Conference semis at Heat, he goes 9 of 26. 2021, round 1 at Nets, goes 12 of 27. 2022, finals versus Warriors. A chance to keep Steph Curry from winning a ring, he goes 6 of 18. And in 2023, most recently, the Eastern Conference Finals versus the Heat. In the playoff exit, he goes 5 of 13. Martin, Joel Embiid and Jason Tatum are amazing regular season performance and can have a good postseason game every now and then, but they're just not consistent, and time again, they've let their teams down and they've held them back from winning a championship. Let's move on now to Jimmy Butler. An underrated regular season lad. Everybody, acknowledges that Jimmy Butler becomes Jimmy Buckets, becomes Jimmy, as you see on my list, in the postseason. But Martin, he had his best regular season of his career. 23, 6, and 5, 2 steals, 54, 35, 85 splits. That's 56% effective field goal percentage. His next best effective field goal percentage of his entire career was 51%. So to jump 5% in effective field goal percentage is pretty darn significant. His last 2 postseasons, he's averaged 27, 7, and 5 on 2 steals a game and 48% shooting. In this system, Jimmy Butler is a top 10 player, no doubt about it. And I have no trouble putting him over Tatum and Embiid because of those playoff exit numbers I've given you. Jimmy Butler arises when things matter most, when you're playing the Greek Freak in the Bucks, and it is essentially a situation where you can put the dagger right in the throat and you can go up 3-1 on the number 1 seed. Jimmy Butler drops 50 plus. If that series gets tied at 2-2, I think they lose the series, Martin. He has 2 finals appearances as the best player. 2 of the last 4 years he's been in the finals. That's the case for a top 10 player. Martin, I'm a LeBron fan. I have him at number 7, and I have KD at 6. And I hope that by me putting a KD above LeBron, it can at least, means something in the aspect of not being extremely biased on this list, but LeBron, 29, 8, and 7 in the regular season on 50% shooting. He had a conference finals appearance. He averaged 24.5, 10, 6.5, 1 and 1 on 50% in the postseason, but he shot 26% from 3, which is significantly lower than how he shot in the postseason over his last 5 postseasons before 2023. He shot 37% from 3, which is above average. This season, he drops 11% from 3. That's kind of the number one reason why I think LeBron dropped a couple spots in my list. However, in the postseason, Martin, he only had one game below 20 points and only had one game below 7 rebounds. You can pencil this guy in to be at least solid in every single postseason game he's going to play. The last couple of seasons, I feel like LeBron has played at a higher overall level compared to the guys I've mentioned so far in this tier. And the myth that LeBron James is nowhere near what he once was is simply just not true. I will admit he's taken one step down, but to take one step down in your most recent game, the last time we saw you, you dropped 40, 10, and 9 with only one turnover against the team that won the title. I mean, if that's a drop-off, I don't know what is. He knocked off the defending champion Warriors. He needs to get his credit. He can still be a Finals MVP if the stars align, and he's going to average more in year 21 than every other year 21 player in the NBA history combined. He just has to average 24 points to do that. LeBron James is still top 10. I have him at number 7. Kevin Durant, Martin, I have him above LeBron because he's just too good of a regular season player. 56% from the field, 40% from 3, and 92% from the line to put up 29 a game. Martin, that might be the most efficient regular season I've ever seen. However, his last 2 postseasons, he shot just 45, 33, 91 splits. The all-efficient, sexy style scorer, Kevin Durant, shooting 33% from 3, is going to drop him a couple, ticks compared to some other guys who, some other lists have him in the top 5. I just don't. When you are elite at one thing, Kevin Durant is solid in a lot of categories, but he's elite at scoring. And when you are elite in one thing and that thing drops as much as it has the last 2 postseasons for KD, not that it can't get back to what it could be, but I can't have him quite in the top 5. And Martin, we got to see this guy win a title without multiple All-NBA teammates. Martin, your thoughts on 10 through 6?
So, you know what? You have the right players. So my order would be 6 is Jimmy. 7 would be LeBron James. 8 would be KD. 9 and 10 would be Tatum and Embiid. I think Embiid needs to be. I think the fact that you mentioned his playoff miscues and all of the first round exits and the lack of getting to the finals, I think is right. I don't think he should have been MVP of the regular season. I think Jokic should have been, the first 3-timers since, Michael Jordan, but that's me. So I think 9 and 10 are right. Tatum and Embiid, they have too many up and down appearances, not only in the postseason, in the regular season. Both of them at some points were up and down. I agree with that. If we're basing it just on playoffs, Jimmy Butler deserves to be at 6. That performance was even better than the performance that took him to the first playoff run. I mean, seriously, that was an amazing playoff run. I think he deserves to be at 6. I give you credit. 7 is LeBron James's number right now. That's where he deserves to be on all of these lists. I think the fact is, again, we're basing it on the postseason. He went up against 2 teams in the first 2 rounds that didn't have enough size, didn't have enough scoring to really make a difference between LeBron James and Anthony Davis on those teams. So I think, once they finally met up with a team that was bigger than them, that was about the same size as them, that could bully them, that could put up more points than them, could be a little bit more efficient than the Lakers, they got exposed by the Denver Nuggets, and I told you that when we did our playoff video, that would happen. So not to sit here and say I told you so. I mean that's for a different day, for a different dollar when we talk about playoffs again down the road in March. But I think LeBron James, I agree, is not a top 5 player anymore, but he's still top 10. I mean, the regular season performance that he put on up until he got the up until he got the points record was amazing. I mean, the dude was almost averaging 30, and yes, he took the gas pedal off once he got the most points, and I don't blame him for that at all. Once you do it, you do it. I think LeBron James is still a top 10 player. I will admit that. KD, again, injuries, again, inconsistency, again, not being able to get a potential superstar team, even out of the first round. If you made it out of the first round and got to the second round, I think they did get out of the second round. But my point is, they just did not. They did get out of the first round. They met up with Denver in the second round. My point on all of that is they couldn't do it again, and KD just couldn't get it done again, and KD fell apart yet again, and it just. I don't get it. I just don't get it. This guy is probably the most efficient player to ever step on a basketball court in a while. And he just, in the biggest times, in the biggest moments where he can finally tell everyone, I told you so, it flounders. And I don't get it. So I think because of those flounders, because of those miscues, because of those missed opportunities to finally tell the world, I told you so, I think he deserves to be a little punished for that one as well. So I think he's 8, but I think Jimmy should be 6. And I think you got 9 and 10 right, and I think LeBron James is 7.
So a surprising turn of events there from Martin, as he turns out to agree with me on 10 through 6. But Martino, there is no way you will agree with me spot for spot on the top 5 because of one specific player indeed. But Martin, let's waste no time. Here is the top 5 in the NBA currently. I have Luka Doncic at 5, Anthony Davis at 4, that's correct, Giannis at 3, Curry at 2, and Nikola Jokic, of course, at number 1. Martin, starting with Luka before I dive into AD and then you rip me apart on AD. Luka drops only one spot from my list last year. I actually had him at 4, I guess, due to not making the playoffs. I'm not going to dock Luka a ton on that because I think that trade was pretty suspect. I think there was some tanking late in the season. They had no defensive players left. Dorian Finney-Smith was gone, and so was their defense. And I'm gonna put faith, I'm gonna put trust into what Luka's done against the Clippers in that postseason first round, and then getting to the Western Conference Finals in 2022. Luka Doncic is just simply that guy. I think he's had the best start to an NBA career ever. That's right. He is already creeping on the heels of first-team All-NBA selections of Steph Curry. And whether you like it or not, he's going to finish his career with more first-team All-NBAs than Steph Curry has. Now, that's not the discussion for now. But a guy whose postseason career averages, Martin, are 32.5, 9, and 8. That's almost MJ's career average, and that's averaging more rebounds and assists than even LeBron does in the postseason. That's all I really have to say for Luka Doncic. I know what he can do, even when it matters most. And let's be real, Slovenia is like one of the top 5-10 teams to win the World Cup in 2024. That's never going to happen again in our lifetime. That's all because of Luka. Now, Anthony Davis. Anthony frickin' Davis. Now, I can't imagine what is going through Martin's head right now for having Anthony Davis in the top 5. But I'm going to make my case, Martin, and I'm going to start it off with addressing the number one narrative around Anthony Davis, that he can't stay healthy. Martin, Anthony Davis is like the toxic girlfriend that you had in high school that just every day is a roller coaster. There are going to be some days that are amazing, some days that are the worst. But all in all, you stick through it because you know how good things you can be. Now, a terrible comparison I just made there. But Anthony Davis, I'm going to reward him from what he's done recently, staying healthy for a full postseason, showing that he, in my opinion, is the best defensive player in the NBA. But I'm going to first start it off with listing the amount of regular season games that have been played by the following players since the 1920 season. So, Martin, essentially from the start of the new decade till now, that's a good sample size, past 3-4 seasons, and here are the regular season numbers. Martin, Steph Curry's played 188 games. Kevin Durant's played only 137. Kawhi Leonard is in the 160s. Kyrie Irving is in the 160s. Anthony Davis has played more than all of those guys with 194. So, if we are going to punish Anthony Davis, then we have to punish Steph Curry as well. I'm not going to punish Steph Curry. Anthony Davis jumped the most out of any player who was in my top 25 last year because I think he solidified himself as the unquestioned best player defensively in the NBA. 3.1 blocks, 1.4 steals, that's 4.5 stocks a game in the postseason, while also putting up 23 points and 14 rebounds on 52% shooting. Martin, if the best defensive player in the NBA is putting up 23 and 14, I gotta have him in the top 5. And he stopped chucking up threes. He didn't even average a 3-point attempt in the postseason last year. I loved it. Anthony Davis was flat out robbed a couple seasons ago in 2020 when Giannis won the Defensive Player of the Year over him, when I'm pretty sure Anthony Davis averaged double in stocks. Double. The best defensive player in the world just proved that he was able to stay healthy for a little bit of time. He averages 25 and 12 in the regular season. He had a career high by a significant margin in rebounds this last year at 12.5. I don't think averaging a career high in rebounds significantly warrants being a soft player. He's played more games than all those guys I listed. So when it comes down to your actual basketball ability, I have Anthony Davis at number 4. Now I have Giannis at number 3. I'm going to tick him down one spot and boost Curry up because I think Giannis, more now than ever, has really showed that he can be a Finals MVP, but he can also be a guy who flames out in the first round because of how teams can game plan against them. In this top 3, Martin, in this top 3, you can actually make a blueprint to hinder Giannis. You can't really make a blueprint to hinder the success of the Warriors or the Nuggets by taking out Curry and Jokic. You can't really do that, but you can kind of do that with Giannis because he doesn't initiate a lot of his possessions. But he's about as good as he can be with his skill set. Now, he needs to improve playmaking, dribbling, some sort of more reliable post shot, a mid-range shot, free throws. He can't shoot threes. He's never going to. But it's not necessarily fair for us to just constantly critique Giannis on this when we didn't critique Shaq on this. Giannis has the argument for the best defensive player in the NBA as well as the best rebounder in the NBA, and I actually think Giannis is the best regular season player in basketball. I would have had him as the MVP if I had a vote. When you win the amount of games he won, and half the season you're missing your all-star, and you have the longest win streak that season in the NBA, that's the MVP to me. There's a ton of reasons, that I could go on and on about how good Giannis is, but ultimately there's a couple critiques I can make on him that I just can't make about Curry and Jokic. Speaking about Stephen Curry, perhaps more than any other player of the era, the stats don't tell the full impact with Curry. I've listed off some, efficiencies, some stat line averages, with some other guys in this top 25. Here are Curry's. They're not going to be supremely different from the numbers I've listed before. Here are his last 35 playoff games in 2022 and 2023, since he had a gap in postseason. 28.5, 6-5 on 46, 38, 83% splits. 83 is a little low than I'd like for Steph Curry from the free throw line. But he won Finals MVP, less than, 16 months ago now? He had a 50-point game in Game 7 this year. Imagine if the Warriors lost in the first round. That would not have been a good look. Curry completely saved them for that. His impact was tremendous against the Lakers. Actually watching those games live, Martin, where Steph Curry really wasn't able to hit his threes. Klay Thompson was not even able to throw it in the ocean. Jordan Poole was putting up 2 of 8 performances, yet Steph Curry was averaging 10 assists, it seemed. His playmaking really impressed me, and above all, I think his leadership and culture that he's formed, when you think of those 2 words, leadership, culture, there's no better combination of that in the NBA, especially with Draymond Green, whether he's wanting to or not, pretty much doing almost everything in his power to corrupt the locker room. Number 1 is Nikola Jokic, no doubt about it. This guy basically averaged a triple-double on 63% shooting. What? He shot 46% from 3 in the playoffs. This guy literally combined Steph Curry, LeBron James, and Shaq into one player, and might have just had the greatest statistical season from October through June that we may have ever seen, Martin. That we may have ever seen. It pains me to say it. It pains me to say it, watching those step back after step back after step back after circus shot after just miraculous shots that are probably never hit in his career again go in. But Martin, he's the best player in the NBA. And for the first time, I believe, other people might disagree with this, but it's the first time, I believe, in 12 years that someone outperformed LeBron James head-to-head. And if we know what we know about LeBron James, that is as exclusive a club as you can get. I had Jokic actually at number 2 last year when a lot of people probably didn't have him at that spot. So I've been high on Jokic. I know what he can do. He's consistent as ever. There's no argument against it now. He's number 1. Martin, I'm sure you have a lot to say, particularly with the number 4 spot. Take it away.
I don't have actually a lot to say. That's the surprising part. Obviously, you got 1, 2, 3 right. I think 2 and 3 you could flip out in any situations. I think, again, if we're going strictly off of playoffs, I add regular season. Giannis had an amazing regular season, dragged a very much injured and unreliant Bucks team to the first spot in the Eastern Conference, and they got exposed once they finally met a defensive team that could kind of contain Giannis in the first round. They got exposed. Curry, I mean, what can we say? That Game 7 performance, magical, man. I mean, seriously, I tip my cap to him. And I wonder, where was that Game 7 performance when everything was on the line after being up 3-1 and he couldn't do it against Cleveland? I wonder where that Game 7 performance has always been, because that's what we kind of been. That's kind of what we've been looking for from Curry as the final little feather to put in his cap. You have to have that memorable. You have to have that memorable playoff game that leaves us with jaws on the floor. And that Game 7 against Sacramento, that bloodfest, that left my jaw on the floor. That was absolutely amazing to watch, period, end of story. 1, Jokic, of course. I mean, look at what he just did in the playoffs. He only lost, Jacob, in all 4 rounds. He lost a total of 4 games. 4 games. He swept the Lakers. He lost 1 against the Heat. He lost 2 against Phoenix. He lost 1 against Minnesota. 4 games in the playoffs he only loses. That is absurd. Most players don't even have those on one playoff run, let alone in their career, obviously. So I thought that was an amazing playoff run. I thought it was the best playoff run we've seen in a while. I think that's right up there with some of LeBron James's playoff runs. I mean, considering how he was
It is.
just that pure dominant. That's just me. Okay. 4 and 5. Okay, let's get it out of the way. This is the big part. This is where I know you're smirking with that smile on your face. You're giggling. I know it. Um, you got me. Okay, you absolutely got me. I'm in a sticky situation here. Do I respect AD at 4, or do I try to come up with a reason why there's another player that should be at 4? You know where I'm going with this, but I'm splitting it down the middle. I'll give you the credit here. You got a case for him being in the top 5 simply based off the playoff performance that he had in the first 2 rounds against Memphis and Golden State. Based off of those 2 rounds, you got a case for being top 5. Based on, yes, he was a little efficient at points in the regular season, but he made up for that at times too. And I was impressed with that as well, considering the Lakers were a team that started 2-10 and finished in the playoffs. And he was part of that plus efficiency that they had in the second half of the season. I give him credit for that. Okay. But when in the third round, when it mattered, when they were finally met with a challenge that whether LeBron James and Anthony Davis could get over, which was Denver, they fell short. Not based on the fact that Anthony Davis couldn't put points up or that he couldn't play defense. It just LeBron and Anthony Davis were not enough to take down Denver. And like you said, that is something that not a lot of teams can say when they go up against head to head against LeBron James. Let's scratch Golden State. Let's scratch Boston. There hasn't been too many teams with just either 2 superstars and a bunch of role players able to step up against LeBron James on his own with a B plus second player rate in Anthony Davis that we all thought of and still beat him and still sweep him at that best. If LeBron James got 2 games on Denver, most of us would have been throwing a celebration for that in the streets of LA, saying that's their equivalent of an NBA Finals title celebration. But they got no games. And LeBron James and Anthony Davis were still efficient. We're still shooting well. We're still putting up points. And they couldn't get it done. So who do I put in if I say that Anthony Davis should be left off that list? I'm putting Jimmy Butler at top 5. I'm putting Jimmy Butler because, again, he played his ass off in the regular season. He dragged a team that did not have a right to be in the finals and just got outplayed. That's simple as that. Now, 5. I have an issue with it. And I have an issue with it in the sense that I think that's where Anthony Davis should be and Luka should be 6. Luka should be 6 because you get Kyrie Irving, you get what you want, you get your GM that you did not like fired, you get the head coach you did not like fired, you get a new coach, a new general manager, you get a new player that you're talking about you don't have anybody in Dallas to help you out, you get another player, yes, it's Kyrie, but you still got an efficient offensive player, and you miss the playoffs? No. You don't go from the 5th seed in the playoffs to the 13th seed and miss out on the playoffs entirely. No, you don't get to be credited as a top 5 player based off of that because you missed the biggest golden ticket that we base on players in this league. I mean, other leagues, we base it on an entire team. In the NBA, we base it on just a player itself, and you failed. You failed to capitalize on something that could have potentially been pretty gobsmacking, jaw-dropping if they would have made the playoffs. Could you imagine if Kyrie and Luka had 50-point-plus appearances, games in the playoffs? What series they could have had with those type of points would have been fun to watch. Instead, they're sitting at home talking about Kyrie's off-field, off-court issues and whether Luka is done with Dallas or not. Luka got what he wanted, and he failed, and he should be punished for that. I think he should be 6. AD should be 5. Jimmy Butler should be 4. Based on that playoff performance, Butler needs the more respect. Butler needs to get the credit. Butler is dragging Miami to playoff runs when they shouldn't even be considered. They should have been in the lottery, not in the finals. I think Butler should be 4. I'll say it again. AD should be 5. Luka should be 6.
Yeah, all in all, a pretty agreeable list if you were to make one compared to mine. I think I was kind of surprised to see you give the credit to LeBron and AD in terms of ranking them this high. Now, your critique on Luka is totally fair, and that's one of those where it's kind of tough to me because that was kind of the line of what did you show me in 2023 versus how good do I think you actually are. And I think Luka Doncic is actually that good, but I will admit I think there are times where Luka can get disinterested, and you could make an argument that can hurt him in these rankings. I personally, like, in my head, Martin, if I'm like, all right, Luka Doncic is in the playoffs, then I think he would have outperformed almost all those guys through 6 through 10. But yeah, Jimmy's really hard to rank as well, because if you're just looking at playoff performance, if we are just ranking the top 5 players from the 2023 postseason, then yeah, Jimmy's on that list. I think somehow, some way, if it's the regular season a little bit, it might just be sheer off of numbers. He doesn't, combine. He doesn't rack up the assists and the rebounds that some of those guys do, like Giannis and Jokic and AD. Jimmy did, injuries or not, he kind of did start to fade. He did start to gas out into June. But I think everybody pretty much is coming around to Jimmy top 10. Jimmy top 5 might be a discussion that we can have after this coming season, depending on what happens. But
the thing about it is, not to cut you off and to extend it for a few more minutes before we sign off. That's the point as well. There shouldn't be a reason Jimmy Butler should be in the top 5. You shouldn't even make a case. But because Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Luka Doncic, and Anthony Davis had shorter playoff runs, left the door open for Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler took advantage of all these doors being open and said, if you guys are going to do that, I'm going to walk right through it and get to where I want to go. And Jokic was the last one standing in front of the doorway saying, not on my watch. This is my time. Step aside. This is where I walk through the door. And I give him credit for that, especially on Luka. Luka is making a case that Jimmy Butler, even though Butler is older and has been through more and has had different styles of play and all of that, he's making a case for why Jimmy Butler should be in his place. Again, you get what you want. You fire the GM, you fire the head coach, you fire your former players that you didn't like. You wanted Jalen Brunson, they decided not to. So you get rid of Kristaps Porzingis before I actually throw an ultimate fit. And they got rid of Porzingis, and they thought that was the right second man. It should have been Brunson. It should have been that 1-2 combo instead of Porzingis and Luka. And I know Porzingis is ultimately gone from that. But my point is, Luka's got to make a decision. Luka's got to make a total tough decision on what is going on in Dallas. Luka is the one that's controlling everything, and Mark Cuban's the one that's saying yes. Somebody's got to put their foot down on Luka, put him on a leash, and tell him to knock it off and actually work on being an actual team. If there's anybody in the NBA, you said this about, I think you said this about, you said it about Trey.
Curry.
About Trey, about how Trey is in that, Allen Iverson, I do it myself. I'm going to take over. You guys step out of my way. I think that's Luka. I think that's ultimately Luka. Luka is the guy that's performing like an Allen Iverson. But the team have done the same thing that Philly did with Iverson, which was to get him players. Get him Sabonis. Get him Dikembe Mutombo. Get him, a bunch of other small role players to make differences on the court, and it didn't work. And Luka is showing that once again. I want all these players, and all of them still don't work, and I don't want them all here, and they're not working. Get rid of them. They can't keep turning the roster over, Luka. You have to make a decision. Otherwise, you're getting passed up, dude. As much as we love to watch these 50-point games, he's turning into James Harden. He's turning into Allen Iverson. He's more of a stat pat than an actual teammate, and it's becoming an issue.
Once again, to recap the top 25 in order from 25 to 1, Mikal Bridges, John Morant, Pascal Siakam, Jaren Jackson Jr., Bam Adebayo, Trae Young, Anthony Edwards, Jalen Brunson, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, De'Aaron Fox, Jaylen Brown, Damian Lillard, Jamal Murray, Kawhi Leonard, Devin Booker, Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum, Jimmy Butler, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Steph Curry, and Nikola Jokic. That is Jay-Z's top 25 players in the NBA. Martin, all in all, we can go on and on about these players all day, but I put some thought into this list. I thought I brought some stats to back it up, and I'm kind of surprised to see that we don't disagree on the NBA as much as I thought.
No, we don't disagree with much on the NBA. I think I mean, you know me. I'm one of the staunches against Embiid and against the Lakers, but when I have to tip my cap, I have to tip my cap, and that's kind of been my point, especially with AD and LeBron. That's why I made my cases on it, which is once they show me that they can shut me up in moments where I didn't think they would make it out of Memphis, I didn't think they would escape out of Golden State, and they proved me wrong, and I have to tip my cap to that. And I think they deserve respect for that, and I think you actually brought a dang good list. I thought this was a great top 25 list. This is better than some of the ESPN and Bleacher Report ones because they're just based off of stats and all of the advanced metrics. But I think you took in some good amount of consideration. I think this is a good list, Jacob.
That is the Coin Flip Podcast. Jacob Zimmerman, Martin Kelly. Martin, do we have any idea what we're going to be talking about next time? Probably back to NFL, right?
We'll talk about some NFL. We'll talk about some college football. We got to get all the conference realignment conversation started. We got to figure out what's going on there. And yeah, we got to talk about the NFL, man. We got to get all that speeded up and catched up. We'll do more NBA and we'll even dive into a little NHL. We'll do some of those once October comes. Once the middle of October comes, once we get a little bit of Halloween weather, we'll pick it back up with all that. But yeah, for right now, NFL, college football, we'll see where we go with that.
I like to sprinkle in a little bit of the NBA just because that is my favorite league personally. But yes, we are going to probably take a small break from basketball as of now. And Martin, I think we're going to pick up with our NFL predictions on a week-to-week basis that we used to do.
Yeah, we'll figure out a way to kind of make that more fun instead of obviously you're in a different state, so we can't do like buy a buddy a dinner or something like that. We'll come up with another prize and we'll come up with some more rules for regular season picks. Look out for that. We'll try to do it after every Monday night football. So between Tuesday and Wednesday, we should have it all set and ready about results and picks for the week upcoming up so that everyone can hear it and enjoy it.
Drop a like on the video. Leave us a comment if you made it this far. Thanks for tuning in. Martin, any final words?
Have a good time. Keep listening to us. Thank you to everybody who does, and have yourself a good day.
That's the Coin Flip Podcast. See ya.
Peace.